Hey, everybody. We are live, and I'm here with my friend Craig. We were just catching up just before we went live, so we'll bring you up to speed on college touring. We've been waiting to talk about direct response fundraising, and just also do some general catch up. Craig, you're a longtime friend. We've had client agency relationship at a couple organizations I've been at. So I've known you for a really, really long time. So I'm excited to catch up. I haven't seen you in person since pre-pandemic. I think
Correct.
you've been out for Chinese, but it's nice to see you. So please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Olga. And it is wonderful to be here with you. I am Craig Zeltsar. I'm one of the principals and co-founders of NNE Marketing, a full-service agency, direct response fundraising agency. A little bit about myself. I live in northeastern Massachusetts in a rural town with lots of space. So I've been able to get outside and do a lot of fun things. I'm married. I have two kids, two older teenagers. One's a sophomore in college and one's a junior in high school.
So we'll get into fundraising piece in a second, but to kind of keep the conversation flowing, you and I were just chatting about college tours and how that's not a vacation.
No.
So what was the most memorable, most crazy college touring experience so far?
It's been pretty benign. I'd say. So this is our second go around. With the first, our first son, we did a tour, April vacation a few years back, where we saw a lot of schools in upstate New York. Luckily, my kids have wanted to stay in the Northeast where we live. And I think it was, what my son liked about school and what my wife and I sort of were looking for was, would this be a good town to come visit, or did they have good restaurants for us to go and good places to stay? But I also think that, the craziest thing is how many people you actually see when you're on these tours that go from school to school with you. So you start to hear them ask the same questions. My wife and I started to have this game of, oh, there's that person, they're going to ask about co-ed dorms, and there's that person, and they're going to ask about religious life on campus and stuff. And so you kind of bump into the same group of people at schools.
Interesting. Okay. So, co-ed dorms would not agree. I keep threatening my kids to ship them off to Canada. So we'll see how that shapes up. So.
I could go to Canada. I love it up there.
I know. It's a good place to be. Craig, so as long as I've known you, you have always been in fundraising, direct response. How did you actually land here? Because I don't think anybody really went, speaking of colleges, I don't think any of us have degrees in undergrad, fundraising, nonprofit management. So how did you land in fundraising?
Sure. So ironically, I like to say that I do have a marketing degree and I'm in marketing. So I'm one of the rare people because I think so many people in our field have a variety of degrees. But when I came out of college, I had been working through my late high school and through my college summers at a place in Boston, a public sailing facility where kids could sail all summer for $1. It's a nonprofit, really great program. I taught adults, and then I ran the kids program for a bunch of years with some staff, and then I went back for one more summer of fun after graduating college, and they had a whole management transition for a variety of reasons. And the board looked at a friend of mine and I who had come back for just our summer of fun with college degrees. And they're like, upstairs. And that's how I got into fundraising. I took on the fundraising roles there, the outreach. I also helped oversee accounting, management. There was a variety of roles, but I really liked the fundraising part. So I stayed there for a few years. I was sort of at a senior level as a young person. So when I went to go look for the next job, it was a little challenging because I was looking at like executive director positions and coming in second because I was, in my mid 20s. And so I got into the direct response fundraising space, worked at a couple of agencies before starting NNE. So I've always worked with nonprofits.
That's interesting. Okay. So with sailing, fun kind of side note, I put my kids in sailing camp on a lake near where my parents live in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And you would think I did something terrible to them, like as if I put them in some awful place. But they stuck together the entire week and they never switched roles. So they each know how to do half of the sailing.
That's great. Well, they always have to go together then, so they
Right.
can make it up. Now, do you sail?
So I've been out on the boat sailing. I would not say I sail. I would probably capsize pretty quickly.
Well,
So
if you come up to Boston with them, we'll take them sailing. I haven't been in a long time, but I still love it.
yeah, I like being on the water, but I don't know that I would trust me to like tack and navigate. So that would be,
We'll give you a role.
we're good swimmers though.
Yeah,
So we're
well,
fine.
that's all you have to be. So,
Exactly. So I'm gonna try to be controversial here. So for the past 10 years, I've been hearing that direct mail is dead, and it seems to be not dead. What's your take on that?
yeah, so I've always, I hear it too. Our agency obviously has clients that have heavy, large direct mail programs. What I've believed is, direct mail has a place within an audience, and I don't think that's going away soon. We could talk about it diminishing, which it certainly has. But the demographic, it attracts a certain demographic. We're never going to get a 20-year-old person or 25-year-old person to respond to direct mail the same level we do someone older. But we've been hearing about its demise for years, and what we really believe is that the donors are going to tell us, as their behavior shifts, and we have to phase things out and in appropriately. We did see a resurgence during the pandemic, which was really interesting. I mean, direct mail was really thriving. And, there's been all kinds of theories. And, the most common one, and I think the most palatable one, is people were at home. Getting your mail was something to go and do and actually read it. My personal forecast is, I think it'll decline. But I'm not so sure it goes away in the next 10 years where it's completely phased out. I also believe organizations should be diversifying and really meeting their donors where they are. So as long as a direct mail program can be profitable and provide, good leads for planned giving and major gifts, great, have that. But that doesn't mean do that in exclusion of another channel.
So I think this was a couple of years ago, where suddenly all the AOL addresses, email addresses, became really popular and hip. So I kind of wonder if the same thing will happen with direct mail. But I was listening the other day, I think it was a podcast, and it was talking about how generational breakdowns, kind of trying to attribute characteristics to generations, is sort of misguided. Because some of it is not really a generational thing, but where you are in terms of your life cycle.
Exactly.
So and I don't know, I think there are some differences because of experiences, like certainly this generation. I mean, 2 year of pandemic certainly will shape them, right? There's probably some germophobia coming out of it. But yeah, I was really struck with that, like direct mail, to your point. You're not going to give to direct mail at 20, but that's not to say that when you turn 65, you won't.
Sure. And I think something we have to be cognizant of is, the group that is moved into the demographic that is more direct mail responsive still is on the cusp of their comfort with technology. I do think, as much as the pandemic caused people to be at home and pay more attention, and obviously the outpouring of support and the level of philanthropy during the pandemic was astounding. I also think we have to be realistic that now, an older generation is more tech savvy because they've been forced, because so much activity has moved online in the past 2 years. I mean, ordering food.
Yes.
All the things, people have had to get comfortable paying online, which they weren't necessarily before.
Well, I feel like it gave a great big acceleration forward because, Zoom was not a new platform, but
Right.
even, what typically would have been a phone call for me has become video call. which I'm fine with. I like seeing the faces and it feels more personable, but technology was not new, but it was sort of, people would dabble with it. And all of a sudden, to your point, calls became video, grocery store, groceries ordering became normal. All of those things just kind of accelerated. So
Absolutely. I was in amazement of how many small companies sort of had to re-identify themselves. We have a great bakery nearby that we've just gone to for years and love. And they had to shut down when things closed, but when they opened back up, they had a whole online ordering platform and a whole way to deliver to their customers. It was just different. So I mean, I think some good things came out as far as us needing to innovate as a society. And I think it just will change how we interact as consumers as well.
So are you back in the office, or you seem to be in your home office right now, but is your company returning back to the office?
So we had a lot of interesting discussions around that. So our company was 2/3 remote anyways before the pandemic. People scattered around the country. And we've always had that philosophy of wanting good people, no matter where they're based. When we started to look at going back, it was actually last summer before the Delta variant hit. And so we started to make a plan, and we were thinking, okay, in October, we'll start to go in. But we realized that so many people were comfortable at home that it felt like we were almost punishing the local people for having to come into the office and add a commute. So we switched to office optional. And obviously the Delta variant and then Omicron coming through, people haven't really been coming in, but we've started to travel a little bit more, and we're hoping to have everybody in to have some FaceTime, and we're just going to see where it goes. I think companies need to be really flexible now.
I've been reading how some recruiters, the second a company announces in-person mandatory, that's when they start contacting staff and trying to poach them. So.
Right. I was talking to somebody about this a little while ago. It's, when you're posting a job or you're job searching, your candidate pool is now national when it used to not be. And when you are searching for a job, you're now going up against people around the country and not just sort of in your backyard. So again, another thing that's dramatically changed. But I always felt it was a little old school to want everybody in the office all the time anyways. But at the same time, I think the pandemic certainly accelerated that with other people, but we just have to be nimble and meet people where they are.
Yeah. Like butts and chairs kind of management.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, you've been remote. What are you seeing with your clients and stuff? Are they going back yet, or?
So I've seen a mixture. Some have sort of stayed predominantly remote. I've seen a couple that are sort of a hybrid, of varying degrees of how fixed or not fixed it is. And I've seen some groups that are, pretty much back to normal business. So, I think about how large organizations are playing a role and sort of how structured or not structured they are. I think all of those play a role. But my observation is that people fall in one of two camps: the ones that love working from home and get things done, and that's kind of I like venturing out, but I really like it. I really like it here. But and then there are people who can't stand it. And it's not just the social thing, but some people really need that structure to get the work done, to not take a nap in the middle of the day or something like that.
Absolutely. I found it, I'm going to find it interesting that now that and I'm curious, now that we've opened up more as a society and start to go out, like, I think the hard part was for me staying at home. I'm an extrovert, as you know, and I'm a people person. And it was just more, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, not having the option to go sit in a coffee shop and work for a couple hours and see people go by. Like, I think that is, now that possibility comes in and we're starting to travel more. I was at the ANA conference in February in DC, and it was just so wonderful to see people. So, I wonder once those connections start to happen, whether people will naturally want to morph to be together a little bit more, because there is something, and especially in what we do, working in collaboration.
Was that you or me beeping? It's interesting. I'm an extrovert as well, but I've gotten kind of used to this. So peopling is a little bit of an effort still. I mean, I like to get out, but in limited doses. And, but coffee shops, those types of things, once that was back, that's when I was like, okay, this is doable. So
yes, sometimes it's just fun to people watch as well, right? Or to see the world go by. And I think for so long we were not able to do that. I've always loved setting up at a coffee shop for a couple hours. I find myself productive. A change of scenery is always nice. So
yeah, and good coffee and snacks.
absolutely.
So Craig, we talked about direct mail a little bit, but what are you seeing overall? Like, I've been reading with fascination the whole crypto philanthropy, and I'm kind of like an old guy on his lawn yelling, "Get off my lawn!" I mean, that's like, I don't fully, I understand it intellectually, but I don't understand it. So what are the big trends that you're seeing?
Sure. Well, if we sort of take a step back and think about just the macro trend over the course of the pandemic, I think when the pandemic hit, I think many of us were just bracing for a complete and utter drop in fundraising revenue. And with the uncertainty, but as we were all pleasantly surprised. And I think we had to be really careful as direct response fundraisers, because even though direct response was up, organizations were losing event revenue and corporate revenue and revenue that was really dependent upon one-on-one visits and people interacting with people. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to take a victory lap, because even being up 20, 30, 40% in direct response wasn't making up for being down 90% in events. But getting through sort of the ups and downs, and they're well documented, the riding the wave through really, what I felt was last spring. And then when people started to come out more and spend their money, we saw a dip in results. And then, pretty good year end. And now we're sort of seeing a normalization, and everybody's waiting. And when you look at all the cost issues and the supply chain issues with direct mail, that factors in. I think that there should be a push, and I mentioned it earlier, in diversification. I think a good fundraising program doesn't put all of its eggs in one basket. So, there's been diversification into what used to be considered non-traditional channels, but they're becoming more and more traditional. Canvassing, digital, looking at some opportunities, through TV and streaming and radio and all that. The crypto currency piece of it is fascinating to me, because I don't claim to understand it either. It is this mystery, and I'm probably at the age where it makes me nervous. But I think something as an industry, we need to figure out how, one of the drawbacks there is you don't always know who it's coming from. Mm-hmm. And I think any strategies that we have as fundraisers, we want to know the donor. And so, that's same with some of the, stuff going on that's happened with Facebook, and Facebook, for like, because we want to be able to have that interaction. We want to be able to build that donor story in our database and understand how they've touched us, and then how we can thank them and talk to them again. So I think we're in for a challenge with a few of those things, that if it really allows people to give anonymously, or without sort of understanding who it is, how as fundraisers do we steward those relationships?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So speaking of Facebook and fundraisers, so NNE generously contributed in the early days of the war in Ukraine. I set up a fundraiser for refugee relief. So kind of to walk you through that experience, I think the hardest thing was wanting to do something and trying to identify organization that I felt was credible to put it out to friends, colleagues, peers, as being worthy of their support. So NNE is one of the supporters that contributed generously, and we raised all in all just a hair under $6,000, which was
wonderful.
within just a few days, and I put it out, but I really was not relentless about it. It was just sort of putting it out for people who wanted to be a part of it. So it got me thinking, and I'm very mindful of supporting local organizations in my community. Like I sponsor a local turkey trot, those types of things. So how do you decide as a company what types of things you support? And kind of part two of that question that's kind of keeping me up at night, or it's not keeping me up at night, but it sort of triggers me, is companies who use causes to sort of appear well-meaning. Like whenever I see Ukrainian flag, or or pink or rainbow, like how much actual authentic effort they put behind it. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with, versus really just sort of a marketing technique to appear a certain way.
Absolutely. I think it's a great discussion, Olga. And first of all, congratulations on raising such a large amount of revenue. As a good fundraiser, I also noticed you changed your goal each time you hit it to
I did.
absolutely. You're a good fundraiser. I think, there's a couple of spots. My business partner, Chris Law, and I have always, we set our agency up to work with nonprofits because we really believe in the missions that we work with. I think some of that just has to start with your sincerity of being in this space, right? Like I've always joked I could take the skills that we have and help an outdoor company sell backpacks. I'm a hiker. I love backpacks, but I sleep better at night knowing that we're helping causes and ones that we believe in. So I think, just having being genuine right up front. I think, we've always allocated a portion of our budget to give back to our clients, but also causes that mean a lot to us personally. Mm-hmm. I have a neurological condition. My younger son has as well. I support that organization personally, but when I've done a walk, Chris, on behalf of the company, has supported the organization as well, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Ukraine was very interesting because not only were you fundraising, many of us were going through personal, sort of personal connections, and I can describe mine in a minute, but we also have an employee from Poland. And, it meant that, so when we were looking at organizations to support, your fundraiser was important. It was a great organization, and also knowing you do your homework. But we also asked our employee, who should we give to that would help support, what are some of the efforts that you're hearing that would matter? So I just think it's about being sincere, and also letting your giving represent the makeup of your company. What drives people's passion as a company, and helping them support, and being, part of their life and their philanthropic journey. I mean, for me, the Ukraine thing is it's so tough to watch, from sitting from the outside. My wife and I are like, can we go over there and do something? Or, is there a family that needs to come here and stay? And all of that part. But, I know, you are from Russia. My family all descends from Russia as well. My grandfather came over, and I was looking up where he was from because I couldn't remember whether it was Ukraine or another part. So I was researching his town, and it was Belarus, close to Ukraine. But I still think that there's this sense of connection as well. It's like, I see my grandfather as one of these strong people that's going through, fighting. In fact, when my grandfather, back in 1917, story goes, half of his family came over here to set a life up. Half of them, including my grandfather, got stuck in Russia while the war broke out. And they weren't reunited for a few years, but the half that was over in Russia lived through such, turmoil and, living in rubble and off of, scraps and stuff. So, I think there's a connection there.
Yeah, I mean, the history of that whole area, I think it's hard to truly grasp just how much has happened. And your point, there are parts that used to be Russia, depending on the year, they might have been Russia or Ukraine or Poland. They've sort of switched hands historically. But it is, it's sort of sense of powerlessness. You're seeing this, probably one of the among the biggest historical events that has happened in our lifetime, and we're watching it unfold. And there's a sense of helplessness. My background, actually, as a child, I went to visit my paternal side grandparents many times in Ukraine, and I was born in Russia proper, but my father's side was all from Ukraine. So it's kind of and I don't think it's unique. There's a lot of families that are on kind of both sides, but then in my case, we're neither Russian or Ukrainian. Being Jewish, that sort of sense of otherness in and of itself. So it's really nuanced and complicated, but seeing what's happening and just sort of, I struggle with, I want to help the refugees, but you're sort of very aware that everyone is not going to be able to leave, nor would they want to leave, right? So how does it solve, how does it end in a way that's acceptable for the people that remain? So that's
you're right about feeling powerless. And then, everybody's problems are individual. What feels like awful to you, even if it's not awful to someone else, it still feels awful. So, we never want to minimize or how people feel. But, I think sitting over here and watching it, my wife and I, my family, we ski all that, as we ski all the time and love it. And, we were sitting there saying, oh, it's going to rain and we're going to lose conditions. And, oh, that really stinks. And it's like, wait a second here. Like, this is such not a problem. Like, this is not like we could have, we could be holding our kids sleeping in a train station for a month. Like, it's all perspective. So, the powerless part and, how do you balance going on with your life and doing things over here, but always keeping that in the back of your mind that there's people going through real hardship.
Right. No, and I struggle with kind of the whole notion of, you see the numbers or this, it's sort of like people being reduced to numbers. I think that really bothers me. Because every one of them, has a story and the family, and it's sort of the casualties.
Well, I think that's also just happened with the news cycle in general. I mean, even, beyond just the Ukraine crisis, but, we hear stories, they talk about them. Quickly, you're right, statistics, and then they move on, and what, nothing sticks anymore. Nothing really settles in. I think just become, unfortunately, not even numb, but it's just ho hum. It's another bad story, and that doesn't allow for us to really dig in and resolve. So, thank goodness for many of the causes that both of us work with, because they're doing the hard work of making sure that those stories stay front and center, and that the underlying issues that are causing these, whether it's, gun violence or poverty or food insecurity or, access for people with disabilities, like any of that stuff, like, thank goodness that these organizations are keeping those causes front and center.
Yeah. I like that. Do something rather than nothing. So I think that's, well, you and I went deep here. Yeah, no, that's great. Good conversation.
I was a little nervous with the people of substance because I wasn't sure. I found it a little ironic with me, but because self-deprecating humor is the the best kind of humor, but we
the self-depreciation, yes.
We've got into substance.
No, absolutely, we absolutely did, and we went pretty deep here. So, Craig, thank you for taking the time to join me today. And we'll share the link so that I know a couple people have asked if it will be featured and posted so they can watch it later. But it's always lovely to see you. So we're going to end the broadcast now.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for everyone listening. Hope you all have a great weekend.